Sean, for letting me come tonight. This is going to be a little bit different show than what you guys are used to. Tonight I'm going to discuss psychology and Mormonism. Just a little bit of background information on myself. I was a member for 31 years of the LDS Church, and I left in October of 2010. And I want everybody up front to know that I left for legitimate reasons. I didn't leave because somebody had hurt me or disrespected me. I actually left for a legitimate reason, a legitimate concern. And so after I left, being a physician, I was quite confused as to how I got kind of caught up in this. And I decided I wanted to do some research to see if I could figure out the psychology of what makes people believe in things that are so obviously not true. So tonight, I'm here to present my information to you and to discuss the psychology of what makes people believe that the LDS Church is true. I'm going to start off by discussing what mind control is versus brainwashing, and then I'm going to discuss something called the B.I.T.E model, which is a mnemonic that was termed by Stephen Hassan, who's America's leading mind control expert. Then I'm going to discuss a psychological technique called the double bind. And I'm going to show you how these two techniques are used in mind control organizations such as the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Moonies, People's Temple, the Muslims, Heaven's Gate, and even many Christian churches. Also, I'll tie it into specifically how Mormonism meets these criteria as well. So first off, we should have a graphic of brainwashing versus mind control. That's the wrong one. It should be brainwashing versus mind control. When a person is... keep going. Okay, well, they must have lost it. But so what in brainwashing, people that are being brainwashed know up front that they're being deceived. The person is usually physically abused or tortured, and the person brainwashing them is always seen as an enemy. They always have their life threatened, or maybe a family member's life threatened, and what they do is they end up getting what's called thought reform and changing their way of thinking in order to preserve their life. But what that does is that causes thought reform and makes them dependent on a group leader. Now, mind control is different. It's more of a sophisticated and subtle trick. The person that it's being perpetrated on has no idea that they're being deceived. There's no physical abuse or torture that is carried out, and it's usually done by a friend or a peer or somebody seen as an authoritarian figure. And the people that are doing it don't even realize that they're part of the system and doing it themselves. The person that being perpetrated on does not feel any type of threat or danger to their life, and they usually perceive it as a positive outcome, but regardless, it still will cause what's called thought reform and bind them to an organization's leader. So right off the get-go, when people say, oh, the LDS are brainwashed, that's completely false. Brainwashing is an offensive term, and the LDS people are not brainwashed. But I am going to show you how, in fact, they are under mind control over the next 20 minutes. And I want you to know that the studies have shown that up to 65% of people are prone to mind control. And it's not because people are stupid. It's because we're human beings, we want to fit in, we want to belong, and we want to be told how to live and what to do. The average person's IQ in these organizations and groups can be up over 130, according to studies. So I studied this mind control from the expert, as I said, Stephen Hassan. He was recruited in the 70s by the Moonies, who some of you may have heard of. And after a couple of years, he was able to get out and be deprogrammed, and he did research himself and went through schooling and became an expert in this field. And he came up with one of the most important research items, which is what's called the B.I.T.E model. It's a mnemonic which shows the 4 areas of how a group achieves mind control over an individual, making them dependent on a group leader. So we should have a graphic for this, for the B.I.T.E model. So the B in the B.I.T.E model stands for behavioral control. The I stands for informational control. The T stands for thought control. And the E stands for emotional control. Now, according to the theory of cognitive dissonance, if you are able to change one of those areas, the others will shift over time. And as soon as you change all 4 of those areas in an individual, they will be under mind control. So first off, we'll discuss behavior. These organizations will do behavior modifications to control their members. They will tell people what to wear, how to wear their clothes, their hair, earrings, tattoos. They will tell them what to eat and drink. They'll regulate their time. They will regulate their interactions with people. They will demand perfection and strict obedience. At times, they will have bizarre rituals and ordinances. And they will always have some type of financial obligation or dependence on the group. So, let's compare this to the LDS Church. The LDS Church regulates what its members wear. You're always to wear your garments 24/7. You must always be in business attire, white shirt, white tie, clean groomed, one piercing, no tattoos. They regulate what you eat and drink by the word of wisdom. They regulate your time by callings and excessive time commitments for indoctrination. Recent studies have shown that on average, LDS people will spend up to 22 hours a week doing church-related activities. Between family home evening, home teaching, scripture study, prayer, Wednesday night mutual, campouts, temple trips, 3-hour blocks and meetings. And the whole purpose of this is to keep you so busy that you don't have time to slow down and to stop and think. You just keep putting your shoulder to the wheel and pushing along. They regulate who you interact with, especially when it comes to apostates. Apostates are forbidden. I had an example of this when I was a physician back in Kansas. I had several LDS patients that were coming to me as I was a member, which was nice. As soon as I decided to leave the church, the bishop announced to the congregation that they were no allowed or longer to talk to me, and they were no allowed or longer to come to me as a physician. Because, again, the LDS Church will regulate who you're able to interact with. And what was interesting in the Moonies, I found that the Moonies have their own special wedding ceremonies. They have their own special clothing that they wear, and they actually follow the law of consecration, which the LDS people were not faithful enough to do. But they also, just like these other organizations I mentioned, are regulated in all these behaviors. An example of strict obedience would be the following quote, if we have the graphic. This is a quote from General Conference in October of 1960. It says, "Always keep your eye on the president of the church, and if he ever tells you to do anything and it is wrong and you do it, the Lord will bless you for it. But you do not need to worry. The Lord will never let his mouthpiece lead the people astray." Now this is strict obedience. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. You just do it. You just let them make the decision for you and push on. So just like Mormons, all other mind control groups use these same tactics to control behavior. Next is I, which stands for information control. Now, I could do hours worth of material on how the LDS does information control, but I don't have time for that. But the way they do it is they will withhold information, they will outright lie, or do truth bending, or just change history altogether. They will tell people what they can and can't read, and of course no critical literature is ever okay. It is immediately labeled as anti-material, which was ironic. In the Moonies, they have their own term for such material, which is called anti-moon. And I just cracked up laughing when I read that in these books and in my studies. These organizations will always tell you the Bible is not trustworthy, but that only they have the ability to interpret it correctly and all other interpretations are wrong. They will have pyramid-style doctrines. They'll have the milk versus the meat and the line upon line, precept upon precept. They won't tell you everything up front. They will encourage members to spy on each other, and they will encourage extensive use of group materials, such as church magazines, church newspapers, church photos, church books, etc. If someone's home is littered with extensive group material, you should be concerned. That's not normal. They will tell you always that new revelations and scriptures trump the old stuff, so just pay attention to the new stuff. And classically, all these organizations will hide their leaders, false prophecies, or criminal or immoral behaviors and downplay them. Just like the guy Sean had on here a few weeks ago, that Namelka guy. They'll just tell you that's all lies and none of that really ever happened, even if you have strict physical evidence. So some examples of information control. Boyd K. Packer has been quoted as saying, "There is a temptation for the writer or the teacher of church history to want to tell everything, whether it is worthy or faith-promoting or not. Some things that are true are not very useful." Now, that's right. Some things aren't very useful because if you tell the truth, it's going to shape your way of thinking. Another example would be when the LDS came out with their most recent video of Joseph Smith, saying that it's the most accurate depiction of the martyrdom of Joseph Smith. Now, my question to you is, does it show Joseph Smith with a gun, shooting it into the crowd and killing 2 men the day he died? No, they just leave it out because it's going to alter your way of thinking about Joseph Smith. An example of lying would be, I think it was 2 to 4 weeks before Joseph Smith died, he was being accused of polygamy. And he gave a speech where he said, "What a thing it is for a man to be accused of committing adultery and having 7 wives, when I can only find one. I am the same man and as innocent as I was 14 years ago." Now, that is a flat-out lie. And when I read that, this is where I had my snapping point. Okay, a snapping point is when everything starts to unravel for you when you're in these kind of an organization and things starting to clear up for you. And when I was reading that quote and searching out, trying to find anywhere that Joseph Smith admitted to practicing polygamy, which he didn't, he lied about it till the day he died, and when I read that he was marrying other men's wives, 11 of them, he forced to have polyandrous relationships, which I verified at FamilySearch.org, I had my snapping moment. All of a sudden, bam. It came to me, and in my mind I said, this man is a liar. He's a con man, and he cannot be trusted. And that's when the cards started to fall, and everything unraveled, and it all started making sense to me. Other examples of information control is easily Joseph Smith burning down the printing press. Missionaries not telling you the deep doctrines. My sister-in-law had the missionaries knock on her doorstep the other day, and of course I prepped her. And she flat out asked them, "Do you believe that you can become God someday?" And they looked her right in the face and said, "No, we don't believe that." It is an outright lie, but they don't want to tell you the doctrines until you're inside because it's a need-to-know basis and you must be indoctrinated in a pyramid-type scale. Spying. Now this was interesting. I never thought about it this way, but actually that is what home teaching serves to do. You go into someone's home, the 2 of you, and you are to find out, are you reading your scriptures? Are you praying? Are you obeying the word of wisdom? Are you doing all these behaviors you're supposed to be doing? And then you report back to your superiors. And if they're not doing those things, then you're sent back, or the missionaries are sent back, or they're brought in to do more behavioral modifications to get them in line. And that is exactly what that is for. They will instill in their members that everything is taken out of context, everybody is a liar, these are all lies, and the internet is evil, and there's always some worldwide conspiracy against their organizations. Just keep in mind, a legitimate organization will allow members the freedom to read what they want, speak to who they want, and make their own decisions. A legitimate organization should do that. It makes sense. If you control somebody's information, you control them. It's like me being a physician. You come to me as a physician, and I'm going to prescribe you a drug. Now, do you want a physician who only listens to the drug reps and hears all the good about the drugs? Or do you want a physician who listens to the drug reps, goes and looks at the research and the studies, looks at the side effects, and then determines, is this a good drug for my patients or not? I think we all know the answer to that. So, again, all these organizations, just like the Mormons, will use information control, and it is completely unethical and immoral. The next is T, which stands for thought control. These groups will always instill in their members that they have the only truth and that they are the only way to salvation. They teach their, this is what is interesting, they teach their members what's called thought-stopping techniques. And what this does is this allows them to prevent critical thinking and shuts down their ability to think for themselves. So that's why when they're in a confrontation with somebody and they're getting kind of riled up and they They don't know what to say. They're getting confused. Somebody's making a good point. They're told to use one of these methods. And in the LDS church, we can see exactly what they do. When in doubt, bear your testimony. And what happens is they bear their testimony, they sing a song, they pray to get out the evil spirits or the evil thoughts, or they tell you, contention is of the devil, and they end the conversation. But what that does is, that just shuts down their brain, they no longer listen, and they don't have a normal, rational conversation of the good and the bad of what you guys are talking about. They just shut down and won't discuss it anymore. And that is what a thought-stopping technique is. If there's any questions that you have, you're always to go to your superiors or to the apologist to answer them. You're not really supposed to figure them out on your own. They will instill in you that there is no critical question or concern or criticism about a leader or a doctrine that is legitimate, and there is absolutely never a legitimate reason to leave the organization. When I went to the temple 2 years before I left, I got pulled aside right before doing some initiatory work, and the guy kind of put his hand on me and said, "Hey, I don't want you to be alarmed, but the ceremony's changed a little bit, so I just want you to be aware of that." And man, when he did that, it was like, boom, I had this horrible feeling. I was confused, and I sat through the whole thing. I didn't listen to a word anybody said. And I just kept saying in my mind, God is the same today, tomorrow, and forever. And it just didn't make sense to me. And when we got done, I asked him, well, why in the world did God change the ceremony? It doesn't make any sense. We're supposed to do this the way it was done 6,000 years ago, just like we're supposed to do baptism a certain way. It has to be done. That's what you've always told me. He said, well, some people were a little uncomfortable. They felt it was a little immodest. So we thought we would change it to make them feel a little more comfortable. And I just kept thinking to myself, that's not an acceptable answer. Why would God give in to man? Well, I was out in the parking lot with my father afterward, and I told him my experience, and I told him, man, I don't want to ever go back in there. I should have never felt that way in there. And he said, don't worry about it. Trust the brother, and they know what they're doing. It doesn't bother me one bit. And then he put his arm around me, and he said, maybe the problem was you just weren't worthy, and you shouldn't have been in there. Because again, it's always the person's fault. It's never the organization's, just as Ashley said in her introduction. It is the organization, people. It is not your fault. It is okay to doubt. These organizations just instill in you that it's always something you do wrong. They teach you that, they indoctrinate you to believe that apostates left because they aren't good enough. They couldn't live up to their potential. They did something wrong. They were hurt by somebody. And now they're untrustworthy liars, so don't listen to them, don't talk to them. That's what all these organizations do, and the LDS do it also. And then we see this happen week after week. What this does to you is this makes you try to find fault in the person talking. Just like every week they call in and they just belittle Sean for what he's wearing, for being, maybe he's a little overweight, maybe he looks a little sloppy, whatever. But they attack the person and they don't attack the information, because that is what you've been indoctrinated to do. An example of this with the Moonies was interesting. I read the book, and Stephen Hassan talks about he was giving a lecture to the media, and some Moonies were sent in to spy on him and report back, you know. And so he gives this lecture. He's talking about mind control and all this, just like what I'm doing tonight. And then afterward, he's all excited, thinking, I might have woke these guys up. And he goes in to talk to the Mooney guys, and he runs them down, and they just look at him, and he goes, what'd you guys think? And they said, you are such a liar. The devil has deceived you, and we can't believe you would do this to the Messiah, because they believed that Mr. Moon was the Messiah, that he proved biblically. And he was just flabbergasted. They did exactly what they were indoctrinated to do. Well, surprisingly to me, a year ago, I was asked to give a talk at a Tea Party convention on Mormonism and politics. It was announced in the newspaper, and the church found out. Well, they sent in their own 2 spies, 2 women. And it was comical because everybody in the group knew each other. And then these 2 women come in that nobody knew. I knew them. They knew me. But they sat apart from each other. They didn't sit together. They made it look like they didn't know each other. And the minute I started talking, one of them pulled out their phone and started recording everything that I was saying. The other one was scribbling notes and had a handful of pamphlets to hand out. Before I could even finish, one of the ladies just couldn't take it anymore. And I talked about history, doctrines, and mind control just like I'm doing tonight. She got up and followed suit and did exactly what I told them the LDS will do. She stood up and told them I was nothing but a liar. I have been deceived, not to listen to me, don't trust me. I didn't know anything I was talking about, and she tried to totally decimate my character. And of course it didn't work. It just made her look worse. And then of course they went back and reported to their superiors so they could come up with a plan to do something back against me, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, the Moonies, the Mormons, and all these mind control organizations, they all do the same thing and use the same techniques to control your thoughts. Lastly is E for emotion. These organizations will all use guilt and fear heavily. They will make you afraid to ever leave or question the group. They will use your family and your peers to manipulate your emotions and scare you from leaving, and to keep you in line behaviorally. They will teach you that all feelings are from God, that good feelings are from God, bad feelings are from Satan. They will teach you that feelings are the ultimate source of truth, when we know full well emotions are nothing more than a psychologically conditioned response. Just like when you hear a patriotic song or you see a happy ending to a movie, or ironically, when I spoke to Christians after leaving the Mormon church and I felt the Holy Spirit as I did in Mormonism, it's a psychologically conditioned response. It's nothing more than Pavlov's dog. If any of you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to research that. They will control your fears by what's called phobias. And I should have a graphic for this. Phobia indoctrination is when irrational fears are implanted subconsciously of ever leaving or questioning the group. Examples would be, there's no happiness outside of the group. Terrible consequences will happen to you if you leave. You will lose your family for eternity. God won't hear your prayers. You will be a failure if you leave. You will be, and then the worst one is, I think, in the temple. When Satan, you get done with your initiatory work, or, well, the endowment session, whatever, and he turns to you, and the screen is right in your eyes, right in your face. You're looking Satan right in the eye, and he says, if you don't keep your covenants today, you will be mine for eternity. Now that is phobia indoctrination. That is an irrational fear implanted into your subconscious to scare you from ever leaving. And it's not true. This happened in my own life. When I left the church, I went to my wife a week later and I said, honey, we don't have a celestial marriage anymore. I'm worried that we're going to end up getting a divorce, that our family's going to fall apart. And she just looked at me and she about slapped me in the face. She couldn't believe I would say something so irrational, so stupid. But it's because I'd had phobia indoctrination done to me. Examples of guilt use would be the unethical use of confession. Now, a lot of us, maybe not all of us, have been to courts of love. I had a period in my life where in my 20s where I was disfellowshipped and I had to go to a court of love. And I had to stand up and tell all of my sins, every gory little detail. It wasn't enough just to say, I broke the law of chastity. They wanted every detail in front of 12 men. Now, that is completely humiliating and unethical. It didn't need to happen. They will use your past sins to manipulate you. There will never be forgiveness or absolution of sins without complete obedience. Examples in the LDS Church of this is, those who receive forgiveness and then repeat the sins are held accountable for their former sins. In order to remain forgiven, we must never commit the sin again. Now, I can give you dozens more examples of quotes like this, but for time's sake, I don't have time, and I could do that for all these sections. Every mind control organization uses emotions to manipulate their members. And another technique they use is something called the double bind. And this is when you put a person in a situation where no is not an option. And this is exactly what the Book of Mormon Challenge is, okay? They come to you, they encourage you, read, pray about this book, pray about the church, based on this limited information that we've given you. The only information we want you to see, and then don't read any of this critical information over here. That's all bad stuff, and if you read that, you're not going to get the right answer. And then they tell you how to interpret your answer to prayer. And of course, it's going to be an emotion, is what they tell you. It's going to be this feeling, which we've already discussed how emotions are irrelevant and conditioned responses. And so the person feels like they have three options, but in reality they only have one option. But they feel like they could say yes, no, or I don't have an answer yet. Well, if you say yes, hooray, let's have a baptism. If you come back with a different answer, the missionary is already pre-programmed to tell you what to do. And that is, well, maybe you're doing something wrong. Maybe it's your fault. Maybe you're not worthy to receive an answer to that prayer. Let's modify your behaviors. Let's stop drinking coffee. Let's stop drinking tea. Quit smoking. Get around more of us. Come to church. Befriend us. Let's get comfortable. And they will go back and forth with you, continuing to modify your behaviors, continuing to tell you there's something wrong with you, until you get all this guilt and shame and either give in and subconsciously get the answer that they want you to get, or until you get mad and tell them to leave you alone. But they will never give up, because the only option is yes. There is no option of no when it comes to the Book of Mormon challenge, and that is a double bind. Now, in summary, I'm going to just go over the top 10 reasons that you should be concerned that you may be under mind control in your organization, okay? Number 10, your organization does not allow scrutiny. Number 9, you run to your leaders and apologists to explain away all of your concerns. Number 8, you are unhappy in your organization, but you can't see leaving as an option. Number 7, you dismiss facts because, quite frankly, they scare you. Number 6, you think there is no happiness ever outside of the group and your life will crumble. Number 5, you had to change your behavior in order to become worthy to receive the correct answer to prayer. Number 4, you fear anti-material because you think that the devil will deceive you. Number 3, you think emotions decipher truth. Number 2, you don't think anyone could ever have a legitimate reason to leave your organization. And number 1, you think there is a worldwide conspiracy against your group. Now, in closing, I just want to reiterate, all mind control organizations use the B.I.T.E model and the double bind techniques to get you to believe what they are teaching and to be bound to their group leader. They're going to alter your behavior, they're going to limit your information, they're going to control your thoughts, they're going to control your emotions, and they're going to destroy your ability to do critical thinking. And there's only one way to prevent this. It is to not give up your ability to do critical thinking. Don't give up the ability to look at the positives and negatives of any organization or any information that's given to you. And most definitely don't let emotions decipher truth. This is exactly why the Bible teaches time and time again, the heart is deceitful, it's untrustworthy, it beareth false witness, and it cannot be trusted. Trust yourselves. I want to thank Sean for letting me come on to this show. I hope this made sense to everybody. I do have one more slide with some suggested readings for everyone. And the Stephen Hassan, he has a website called freedomofmind.com. That's where I got the majority of this information, as well as these 2 books, Combating Cult Mind Control, Releasing the Bonds, Empowering People to Think for Themselves. If you Google Stephen Hassan, you will have dozens of lectures you can watch and listen, and a lot of them don't say anything about Mormonism. But he did actually give a talk to the Ex-Mormon Conference. Read Robert J. Lifton's book on thought reform and psychology. But just research, look at it for yourself. Do the comparisons that I've done and see what you think.